week one vlog. Um, First impressions and arrival. I arrived here over a week ago on Thursday of the 28th, and I stayed in Ooster Park, so that was a very different experience than staying here and near Amsterdam Central. I am seeing one, it's a lot more touristy and a lot more people, like a lot more concentrated areas. Um, Booster Park was very chill, very laid back. The age range was a little different. Like you could tell there was an age range for where I was, or like when I moved, went to different areas. Like, but I liked that a lot better just because it was more people my age and not as many people yelling all the time. Um, Also noticed that I was very European, and by that I mean very white. That was like the first thing I called my mom, and I was like, I went out after I took the longest nap, and I was like, Mom, they're so white. Like, I don't know what I was expecting. It's Europe, but I've never been to Europe, so I didn't obviously I didn't know what to expect. But that's different getting used to. I feel like, but it's fine. Um, Other things. This beautiful. I'm actually in the garden of our dorms right now. I can't believe this is where we'll be living for the next 5 weeks. Like I already can tell I'm gonna be really sad when we leave. But first thing, and I also really enjoyed our discussion on it. It was uh, I won like the direction of this class. Like I have been in many like roundtable discussion classes that we do a lot of spit mouthing, but we don't really have any connection between any of it, so it's hard to always come away with a good consensus of what happened. So I one just like that, but two, like just to go back to the actual book, um, what I was thinking about after this class is the one thing that really stuck out to me is how we perceive Amsterdam and why everyone came into this thinking that yeah, this is a very liberal place, and one that just that definitely goes with representations of media both here in the U.S. and here in the Netherlands. In the U.S., no one we can barely address our own issues right now in a very straightforward tone. So, and then plus our connections with Western Europe. I think it would be very hard to get the full scope of the idea because Muslim people usually don't are not afforded that type of representation. Like they're not. If this is their story to tell at this point, the Dutch aren't going to come out and say, "Oh yeah, we're super racist and Islamophobic right now." Like that plays a big part in it, and I think I just need to think more about that. I feel like I'm always looking at just like to take the time because I don't think this would have come up in class, but I did think about it after um Friday when we talked about voice, audience, and purpose. And I feel like the biggest problem I had with this book when I was reading it was the voice. Slash, yeah, just mostly the voice. Um, his the tone kind of got me off a little bit sometimes because he'd be very ironic or sarcastic about something it seemed, and then the next second very serious. I know beginning chapter 4, the Dutch tragedy. It's about the Dutch melodrama that came on. It was very wild and all over the place. I'm not done, so I initially knew that it was something was up, but it would be nice to get part two before part one, and it didn't do much that this was one done by Theo Van Gogh, and then he followed it up by saying on page 108. And yet, Van Gogh was more complicated than that. Although he hated Islam as much as Christianity, and thought that religion itself was the source of all evil, he also said that there are 100,000 decent Muslims to whom we Dutch people ought to reach out. Although this multicultural soap opera ended badly, his sympathy was clearly with Najib and Julia, Najib's sister who fled to France with her non-Muslim lover. And Van Gogh supported anyone in life or in fiction who defied conventions, who rebelled against social religious constraints, whatever else he was. Van Gogh was not a racist. I just felt like we didn't get enough evidence in this book to say Van Gogh was not a racist, but I guess we'll roll with it. Also, Muhammad was, I think on the next page, on page 110, when the author is talking to a friend of Theo, he puts dish city in parentheses, and I guess I didn't really understand the purpose behind that, and something like saying Mohammed Boyeri is a Islamic terrorist. Like those are very loaded terms. Dish city obviously is standing here for being a predominantly Moroccan or Turkish city, so again, loaded terms and concepts that should probably be unpacked more to really understand. Speaking Bell Hooks right off the bat, um, was that the race and gender chapter was not only 2 pages. I just think that should be a little longer or expanded upon in some way, shape, or form. It does not have to be specific to the U.S., even though that's what the majority of the book is. It's definitely more directed to a U.S. audience based on the facts or the history and examples that she gives. It's not very relatable on a globalized context, and that is broken up on in this case. Um, I really did enjoy our discussion on this as well, especially the segments on internalized sexism. I don't think any of us really realize how well we all know of internalized sexism, but it's a lot harder to determine what those actions or thoughts actually mean or represent when they're so deeply ingrained with us. And I definitely agree with Jess in that it's a lot. The first thought that we may have that is either sexist, racist, homophobic, um, on those ism or phobic lines, that's definitely an important thought because it proves just how much farther we have to work to free ourselves from these systems of oppression, but also um, it's it's truly a representation um, of our society and how of our thinking really. So that should definitely be given a little bit more. I will definitely be giving a bit more thought, hopefully, due to that um, class. But also the fact that we did take the next step to come up with solutions to um, issues when issues within being a feminist, how we try to create feminist spaces or evolve this movement beyond a singular thing. The feminist movement isn't a singular movement, so um, one, it's really great that Bell Hooks does that, and I think that was pointed out in class, but also that we can define different ways to diversify the movement, which is required if we do want feminism to be for everybody at one point or time. Um, yeah, those are my thoughts on feminism for everybody. Then to go ahead and wrap everything up about this week, it's a really good week. Learned a lot of things, ate a lot of good food, even if sometimes it took a couple hours. I really enjoyed the walking tour, even though I also realized that we as Americans are very complainy, and I feel like I should work on that. in myself at least, just because I could hear myself complaining about how hot it was, and I'm like, oh man, just step it up, but also complain. Um, but I did see a lot. I'm excited to go back to Amsterdam Nord. One, just because I may need to get my hair braided here at one point, and I heard there were actual African braiding shops in Amsterdam Nord. So it was nice to see how to get there and how to get back. Um,